Hey everyone, and welcome to Virtual Confirmation Week 2. Um, I'm your host for the evening, Nathan, and thanks for tuning in. I, for one, have been up to just about nothing the last week or two, except for growing this coronavirus beard, which has been pretty exciting for me. I even have plans and ambitions to turn it into a mustache when the time is right, so stay tuned and I'm hoping to have a killer mustache at some point soon. So, anyway, um, yeah, other than growing a coronavirus beard, I don't really have anything more to report on. So, I'm going to jump right into our lesson for this week. This week, for confirmation, we are going to talk about Jesus' life. So, Jesus is odd in the sense that he tended to hang around people uh, that most people said he shouldn't be near. Um, he hung around sick people, mentally unstable people, prostitutes, and people that were basically looked down upon in that society. His friends were all of the misfits and the outcasts of the world, and people that others said you shouldn't hang around. But that was just who Jesus was. He was super compassionate, and he seemed to take an interest in each and every person that he would interact with. Jesus did not come to be a political leader or to become a new emperor or to overthrow a government. Instead, he was a carpenter who um, kind of remained in one area almost his entire life and only had a 3-year ministry. So that's like kind of an overview of Jesus' personality. Um, but here is a passage that kind of explains Jesus' character. And the passage is called Jesus Heals a Crippled Woman, and it's from Luke 13. And it goes like this. Now Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and behold, there was a woman who had had a disabling spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not fully straighten herself. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said to her, "Woman, you are freed from your disability." And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight, and she glorified God. But the ruler of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, said to the people, "There are 6 days in which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be healed, but not on the Sabbath day." Then Jesus answered him, "You hypocrites! Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to water it? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day?" As he said these things, all his adversaries were put to shame, and all the people rejoiced at all the glorious things that were done by him. Thus ends the reading. So, what do we learn from this passage? Few things. One is that Jesus cares for people, and he is not necessarily one for the rules. And he loves people and wants to see people be healed. Um, and yeah, that's like kind of the big takeaway from the passage is people were throwing rules at Jesus and trying to pin him against a wall, and Jesus kind of said, basically, I'd do the same thing for you if you were in that situation that he did for the disabled woman. So, but there's one other thing that is super important about Jesus' life, and it's kind of the reason that his life has had such an impact on so many people, and the repercussions for all of humanity are huge. And that's because Jesus ended up dying, and he ended up being murdered and crucified on a cross and rising again. And this is not something that a political leader would ever do, or someone that typically was in a stance of power would ever do. It was so radical and unheard of. But Jesus was also killed by people who didn't understand him and they didn't appreciate him. But more importantly, he was killed because of our sin. Um, and we talked recently about the gospel, and the gospel being kind of God's solution to the problem of sin in the world. And Jesus is the gospel because Jesus paid the price of sin for us, even though he wasn't sinful himself. And he did that because he loves us and he wants to forgive us. So there's a fun little kind of analogy that can maybe help us understand the impact of Jesus's life, death, and resurrection for us. And it's actually about this. Imagine you are at a grocery store and you're in the checkout line and you realize that when you're about to pay for your groceries, you forgot your wallet and you can't buy your groceries. Money has to be paid for the groceries or else you'd be stealing them. You either need to cough up the money or you walk out empty-handed. Now, imagine that the person behind you in line takes out their wallet and pays for your groceries for you. You walk out with your groceries, and the grocery store gets the money that they need. That is kind of what Jesus did for us. Something had to be paid for the cost of our sin. And Jesus paid that cost so that we wouldn't have to. So now we are free to live our lives. We are forgiven and in the loving hands of God's mercy each and every day to come because of what Jesus did on the cross. So that is a brief overview of Jesus' life. Thank you for tuning in this week. I hope to see you soon. I also hope that you guys have found some time to just rest and kind of, oddly enough, enjoy this season, even given the many difficulties that come along with it. So we have been praying for you and are thinking about you guys a lot. So until next week, thanks for tuning in to Virtual Confirmation Class on Jesus' Life. See you guys.